1. This happened years ago, but I remember it super vividly and always wondered what others would think. I swear on everything I have that this is a true story and I'm not fabricating a single detail. We were living in a small town and my mom and I were going to a hospital in the city. We pulled into a large parking garage and found a space on the 7th floor. We'd parked between a red car and a blue car, facing outside toward a large market sign on the side of a brick building. When we got out, she pointed at a beam on the ceiling that said 7N, meaning 7th floor, facing north, and said, "Remember where we parked?" I took in the surroundings, we made our way to the nearby elevator, and went down to the ground floor, and then walked into the hospital. A while later we left the hospital and got back into the elevator on the ground floor of the parking garage. 7th floor, I said to my mom, in case she had forgotten. She pressed the 7th button and up we went. When the doors opened on the 7th floor, we got out and immediately froze. There was the beam that said 7N, there was the brick building with the market sign, there was the red car and the blue car. And in the space between where we knew we had parked was nothing, an empty parking space. "Oh no," my mom said. We made our way over to the empty space. Why, I don't know. We made sure that we were on the right floor. We made sure that the cars that were on either side of our car were the same. We briefly went in circles, making sure that we were in the right place and not losing our minds. "Well, I guess we have to go back down to the ground floor and tell the parking attendant that our car was stolen," my mom said. We got back in the same elevator, we pressed the ground floor button and made our way back down. When the elevator stopped, the doors opened and we froze again. Somehow we were no longer in the parking garage, but the empty lobby of a theater. Completely confused, we stepped out for a moment and looked around, wondering how the heck we got there. "Now what?" I said. "Let's go back up to the 7th floor again," my mom suggested. We were both at a complete loss, so I guess trying to retrace our steps was the only thing she could think of. We got back into the same elevator, and she pressed 7 again. We reached the 7th floor again, and the doors opened. At this point, I think my jaw hit the floor. We were back where we started. There was a beam that said 7N, there was the brick building with the market sign, there was the red car and the blue car, and in the space between sat our car. We made our way over again, and I just stood there with my hand on our car. I looked around again. It was where we had been moments ago, but our car had been missing. Now it was inexplicably back where it started. My mom and I got back in our car, noting that absolutely nothing was out of place from when we had left it. We made our way home without incident. We still occasionally talk about this incident, we both experienced it, and we both remember it the same way. We can't explain it, and nothing like it has happened since. I wonder what the heck happened. 2. Those who know me know that since last year I have had a strong connection with Scotland. Since I was little, I had dreams about mountains that made me feel at home. After really getting interested in this story, thanks to series like Rain and Outlander, I started to investigate and realized that the place I felt like home was Scotland. Now, I will get to the point, but if anyone is interested in continuing to hear about my dreams about this recently, I will be happy to share them with you in DM. The last dream I had was yesterday. It was like this. I remember being in line for what would be a punishment. They were going to behead me. Everything was dark around me. It seemed a small town, in brown tones, since the floor was entirely of black and wet earth. We were all in relatively distinctive clothes of the time, probably 17 or 1800, and 2 people who were ready to be beheaded had already been put on the stand. They did not use a guillotine. I also remember that to make the cut, they used their swords. They cut off their heads, and I and another girl were the next ones. I felt that it wasn't exactly me, but that I was fulfilling the role of another person who was me in that life, a man. Both supports were next to each other. They positioned us, and I remember having closed my eyes for some reason. I even remember that when you are beheaded, you can continue to see for 3 to 5 seconds, since there is still oxygen in your brain. Anyway, nothing had happened. I decided to open my left eye halfway to know why my head had not been cut off yet, and in doing so I inadvertently opened my eyes in real life. Luckily, I was able to resume the dream, and it ended like this. Me and the other girl were told that we could go. I felt a strange discomfort when walking, like when something is cutting off your circulation and you cannot walk well. I looked down. I had not felt any pain or discomfort until that moment. I realized that my feet had been replaced by pig's feet, and I never see the girl again. That was the first part. The weird thing happened yesterday, but in the afternoon. A couple of months ago, I had decided to put my closet in order, separating things to donate and keep. I had found a long-sleeved shirt that was put in the pile to donate. In the end, I looked at it and said, no, I'm not going to give it away. For some reason, I feel like it will be useful later. Well, that day was yesterday. Since I live in Paraguay, and lately we have been having cool days, I decided to look for something to keep warm, and casually I remembered that shirt, which is perhaps the only warm I have. Here things began. I got out of showering, got dressed, and went to the kitchen where my girlfriend was working. I went up to her and said, "Looks like I'm coming from Scotland, since the shirt is somewhat like the clothes they were wearing before." Then I looked down and was amazed. I was literally shocked. What appeared to be the Scottish flag was embroidered on the bottom left. She saw my surprised face, and I asked her if I had something written on the back, but she said no. Although the shirt did have something written on its right shoulder that said "No End." I would like to emphasize that this shirt only appeared inside my closet, and I have had it for years. I have never paid any attention to it, and I have already asked my parents if they recognize it. The response of both was negative, and they had never seen it before. 3. Hi. So I got engaged this past Valentine's, and it honestly took me a minute to love the ring. But yesterday, 4/11/20, my friend and I got bored and decided to test out some hair color she had in her bathroom. After a strand test, I decided to say F it and go with my whole head pastel pink. I didn't want to stain my ring or get dye stuck in it, so I took it off and specifically placed it in my shirt pocket and buttoned it closed. I later got home and realized I never put it back on and looked in the shirt pocket, but it wasn't there. I freaked out, of course, and checked my pants pockets and even went through my dirty laundry to make sure, looked in my car, and tried calling my friend to see if she'd seen my ring. She'd went to bed for the night, so I had to wait until morning. She replied later that no, she hadn't seen it. I told my fiancé immediately that night that I can't find it, and he thankfully wasn't freaking out, and just said to text my friend again and go retrace my steps. Now I had only been at 3 places without my ring on: her bathroom, my car, and my room. I knew exactly when I took it off and where I placed it. The next day I went over, and she really didn't help that much, but I thought nothing of it, and she left me to search through whatever I want for about an hour. We sat in my car, and I decided I was going to have to purchase another ring because there's nowhere else it could be. Defeated and heartbroken, I went back home and cried the entire way back. I told my fiancé we could not find it, and he thought it was suspicious that she didn't seem too eager to help me find the ring, or care that I was visibly in distress and was asking about how much the ring was, blah blah blah. Basically, we thought she might have taken it because she has a history of shoplifting and is sometimes toxic as a friend. But anyways, the ring was 100% missing. I went online, ordered a cheaper ring, went to take a shower, and while shampooing my hair, I felt a hand stroke the side of my face, which promptly scared me, but there was nothing there. I ignored it, and continued my night of feeling guilty and horrible about losing the ring. So, fast forward to this evening. I was about to do laundry and came back from the laundry room to grab clothes, and something just told me to look one more time. I grabbed the shirt and closed my eyes, but I noticed the button was perfectly closed, unlike before, and begged for it to be back in the pocket. To my surprise, it was back. I have no clue if it was some test from Cupid, paranormal, or witchcraft, but all I know is something told me to look in that same pocket for the 5th time, and it was back. 4. So I'm from England. Our school years are kinda different. I was in my last year of secondary school, and I was getting ready to go to sleep on a school night. For those unfamiliar with the app Snapchat, you are able to make private stories and select certain friends who can see your snaps. I was posting on there. The last thing I posted was at 11:15 p.m. before going to sleep. Well, anyway, I was woken up at what I thought was 7:20 a.m. It felt like I had been sleeping forever, when I heard the familiar opening of my bedroom door scraping along my floor. which pulled me out of my deep sleep and into that phase where you come back to your senses. You can hear noise, see light while your eyes are closed, feel touch, etc. And seconds later I heard my mum calling me, "Come on, it's 7:20, start getting ready." To which I turned in bed and began to wake up telling her, well, in a minute. I sat up in bed. It was a cold morning, and it was still dark out, nothing unusual in this season. So I went and got my makeup from my dressing table and grabbed my mirror, taking them back to my bed so I could stay warm under the covers whilst I got ready. I checked my phone, 7:23 a.m. it read. I posted a Snapchat picture of myself, expecting my friends to respond, and continued doing my makeup. When my makeup was done, around 7:50, I scrolled through Facebook, then put down my phone to go do my hair. Now this is where it gets strange. When I came back to my phone to check the time, it said it was 4:42 a.m. I was completely mind-blown because I'd spent enough time getting ready and looked at my phone enough times to be fully awake, and had no reason to blame it on still being half asleep. I was absolutely gobsmacked. Posted multiple snaps looking crazy, asking people to confirm what time it was. Obviously, I had no response at that time, but it really did feel like something had shifted from getting up to looking at my phone for the last time. What baffles me is that my door was actually open when I went to get my makeup from the dressing table too, giving me reason to believe that my mum really had come in and opened the door. What's more confusing is that I went back to sleep afterwards for a few more hours, and my mum repeated those exact words to me when I woke up. And I asked if she'd come in earlier, and thought it was time for me to get up, but obviously she said no. To this day, I still can't get my head around how time changed in front of my eyes, how things happened to me, hours before, and then got repeated. This was a few months ago now, and still nobody I've spoken to can come up with a reasonable explanation. 5. This happened to me over a year ago, and to this day it still creeps me out, so I thought I'd share. For context, I'm a university student. I study on a campus that is solely for animal, rural, and agricultural studies. The campus is located about an hour out of the city, and it consists of the main building with a few classrooms and labs on a giant plot of farmland in the middle of nowhere. The campus is huge, and other than the main building, the only thing on it is a small pub/store/cafeteria, a library, and a bunch of animal enclosures spread across the rest of the land. An important detail here is that there's only one long road that you can use to get to the campus. It's essentially just a straight road that if you follow in one direction, you'll end up in a village. Or if you go in the other direction, it will take you into the city. There is no road you can turn onto for miles in both directions because all there is sheep. So on a Friday after I had finished my classes for the day, I had gone outside to wait to catch the bus into the city. I finished class that day at 5 p.m., which is when all classes end for the day, and the main building closes. So a bunch of other students, around 100 of us, were out there waiting for the bus as well. Another important thing is that because our campus is in the middle of nowhere, there's only one bus line that comes out there, and it comes on the hour every hour. Since we all got out at 5, we missed the 5 p.m. bus and had to wait for the 6 p.m. bus. The bus stop only has one little bench, so everyone just scatters around the side of the road and sits on the grass under the trees while we wait. When the bus comes around the corner from the village, we all stand up and sprint to the stop to queue for the bus because the bus only has so many seats, and standing for an hour ride or having to wait for the next bus when it fills is the absolute worst. That day wasn't any different. When the bus came into view, myself and everyone else jumped up and rushed to the front of the queue. This is where it gets weird. We all saw the bus. We all got up to get on the bus, but when we looked back to where the bus was, it had just disappeared. There's nowhere it could have turned. It was close enough that if it would have needed to turn around, we would have seen it. If it broke down and had to pull over, it's a straight road. We would see it on the side of the road, but it was just gone. A double-decker doesn't just disappear within seconds. I swear I thought I was going crazy, and maybe it was only me that saw the bus as I glanced around at everyone else. They were all looking around just as puzzled as I was. We all stood there waiting for it to reappear from wherever it went, but it never did. We had to wait another hour for a different bus to come, and I'm still so confused. How do you disappear a giant bus? 6. 3 years ago, I got it in my head that I could get my ex-girlfriend back with a big romantic gesture. Stupid, I know. But I packed up the bare essentials, got in my car, and drove across the country. I was making a lot of impulsive decisions back then. A lot of weird shit happened on that road trip. I stayed off the highway, didn't use maps, and received a few weird phone calls where I just hear some garbled syllables before we got disconnected. But if I got into the details, this post would go on forever. The weirdest thing that happened had to do with my grandmother's engagement ring. I inherited her rings after she died, and I've always kept them in the same blue velvet box. I took them with me on this road trip. I didn't actually expect to propose to my ex or anything, but I wanted to have them. I'm a romantic. Was feeling a bit Jim Halpert from The Office. I don't know. Finally made it to my ex-girlfriend's city, where one of my childhood best friends just so happens to also live. I was living out of my car at the time, wasn't in the best shape. On October 30th, I decided to pay my friend a surprise visit. Before I got to his house, and I remember this distinctly, I opened the blue box to check out the rings. And there they were. I remember admiring how they sparkled. I closed the box and returned it to my backpack. So I go to my friend's house. He's not exactly thrilled to see me, he has to go to work, but says I can chill on his couch until he gets back. Now, there were a few strange things about the house. All the timepieces were broken, for example, and one of his roommates had the same name as my grandmother. And not just the same name, but the same exact bedroom furniture, and the television was on. It was saying shit that felt just a bit too on the nose, like it was directed at me. And to be honest, this still happens sometimes, but I'm not claiming that's a glitch. I'll elaborate more at the end of the story. I just wanted to add it to the unreality of the situation. And then my friend's roommate came out of the shower. I don't want to sound like a douchebag for falling for a girl just because I saw her in a towel, but holy fuck, she was confident. She was sly, she was funny. And her name was Trinity. As soon as she closed her bedroom door, I reached into my backpack for the engagement ring. Not to propose, I just wanted to check on it. I was filled with the promise of the moment. And as I said, romantic, lots of stupid, impulsive decisions. I retrieved and opened the blue box, and the rings were gone. To say I was stunned is an understatement. It was everything I could do not to panic. The rings had been on my person since I'd checked on them that morning. What possibly could have happened? I still don't know. At the time, time travel occurred to me as a remote possibility, and when I suggested it to Trinity, she fucking believed me. And the way she looked at me, it was almost like she remembered me from another timeline. Although I know that's not possible, and if it were, she wasn't telling. Unfortunately, when I mentioned it to my ex-girlfriend, she was not willing to entertain the possibility, and after a litany of unreal shenanigans I would rather not get into, I ended up on a psych ward later that night. They diagnosed me with bipolar disorder. Okay, I know, and maybe I'm just crazy. To this day, I feel like I get messages from music and television, and I know I see patterns and meaning where other people don't. But I think my mania was triggered by a real glitch. Can't crazy people experience glitches too? Couldn't we be even more predisposed to noticing them, since our brains can't conform to the matrix as easily? As Kurt Vonnegut says in Slaughterhouse-5, it was about people whose mental diseases couldn't be treated because the causes of the diseases were all in the fourth dimension, and three-dimensional earthling doctors couldn't see those causes at all, or even imagine them. When they released me from the hospital 2 weeks later, 2 weeks that I barely remember, first thing I did was go through all my stuff to make sure it was still there. They had confiscated it when I was sectioned. And when I opened the blue box, the rings were back. I admit I was not in a good place then, and I'm in a much better place now, which is why I feel ready to talk about it. To be honest, this scared the shit out of me, and I now believe in a lot of things that I used to be skeptical of. I've been working on a piece of fiction about this experience, because even though it's been 3 years, I still can't get it out of my head. And no, the rings didn't just fall out of the box. Don't see how that could have happened, and I thoroughly searched my backpack before confiding in my ex-girlfriend. Another note that's given me a lot of solace since this happened is from Douglas Adams' Dirk Gently. Time and space heal themselves up and around them, and people simply remember a version of events which makes as much sense as they require it to make. What do you think? Time travel? 7. One time when I was quite young, maybe 5 or 6, I went to this stately home in the UK where I live, which has a sort of farm and play area section attached to it. I remember it having 2 levels. One had the entrance with an information booth with a courtyard and animals surrounding it, and on the second level there were some more animals and a large play area with slides, climbing frames, and a countless number of children. Anyway, I was having fun and was really looking forward to going to pet the animals, and most importantly, play in the play park. There was a big set of steps to get up to the second level, and I remember being behind my dad climbing up. I could see his shoes and everything. When I got to the top, I looked up to see the play park, and to my right, there were loads of animals, but my dad or any of my family weren't in sight. I legitimately just stood there and looked around, couldn't see them. I remember walking up to some animals. May have been goats or sheep, and thinking initially, if I go there, my parents may find me, as I've always loved animals. Must have been a minute or 2, and I was all alone. Not sure if they knew I was missing, but it felt kind of strange that they hadn't found me yet. It wasn't entirely busy either. Upon getting worried, I decided to go back down the stairs and do a lap around the courtyard, which had a sort of tower in the middle of it, and couldn't find my parents. I remember thinking to myself, let me do one more lap, and if I can't find them, I'll head to the information booth, which was at the entrance of the courtyard. I've always been a good kid and listened to my parents when they talk about what to do when I'm lost, and not to talk to or go with strangers. But I felt like I was vulnerable and alone for such a long time that I was lucky that I wasn't taken or anything. This was the first glitch that came together. It felt like I was invisible. No adult came up to me to ask if I was okay, and my parents seemed to vanish and not be looking where I was, and I know I was very young, but it seemed to be a really long time. But I thought maybe my parents thought I was playing in the play park or whatever. This section ended when I went up to the information booth and there was a lady in there with a man behind her at the other window. I remember just saying, "I'm lost." She was very nice and told me to take a seat at the stool that was conveniently placed outside the booth by the bushes behind it. This is where another weird moment happened. After about 30 seconds, I'd say, the man who was in there said, "We have a missing boy at the info booth near the entrance." Called and then he gave my name, which was incredibly weird as all I had said to them was "I'm lost." He then walked out, maybe another 30 seconds later, to ask for my name. I replied saying he just said my name, but he told me he needed to do an announcement so my parents could find me, and seemed like he hadn't done one yet, which was strange. And from my memory after that, he didn't come back and didn't do another announcement. After this, I saw my dad on the upper level, and he obviously looked concerned, but must have heard the announcement as he was looking my way and waved. Took him a minute or so to get to me. Turns out I had only been gone for a couple of minutes. Despite being a kid, I can specifically remember it being about 15 minutes minimum. Not sure if it's a glitch, poor memory, or poor time judgment, but it was a weird situation that I remember to this day. 8. I want to start off by saying that I'm a huge skeptic, and would read posts with friends to guess which ones were lies or made up, for fun and drinking game. So, sorry I guess, here I am anyways. What goes around comes around. This story is something that happened not long ago, and I still can't grasp it. Always since I was a kid, I had these déjà vu feelings quite regularly, maybe twice a week. It can be about anything from conversations to places I've been to. Over time, I've come to accept them as just a normal thing everyone has, so it doesn't bother me, and they've always been foggy until recently. So I met my friend on my way home from work. It was a quick conversation as he had to go to his new work. We talked about our dream regarding travel to the Caribbean and do island jumping, something we always wanted. This was before Corona, by the way. And I get this déjà vu feeling about what he will say. So I mumble the same time as he speaks, better yet, let's buy a boat, of course. It becomes a bit silent as he looks at me and laughs. Clearly he didn't overthink it. Anyways, he looks at his phone and heads off, not wanting to be late. The next day I call him to ask if he wants to hang out. We meet up, and I jokingly say how crazy it was that I knew what he was going to say when we ran into each other. But he just looks confused at me, asking what I meant. I look confused back, explaining it again. Yeah, yesterday when we ran into each other and said the same thing exactly at the same time? The fuck, dude? To be frank, it feels like something one would remember, but my friend doesn't at all. The really strange part is when he says, "What you mean when we met yesterday, by the way?" Obviously we fuck with each other all the time in my friends group, so it's more like taking it as very funny, at first, which I do. But my friend is dead serious. I explain it one more time, but he stops me this time mid-convo, asking how I knew about his new work. He started it yesterday and hadn't told anyone about it since he was ashamed of being a dealer for the local casino. Now I got this cold feeling to my core. I felt so uneasy and almost sick. My head was spinning. Then I just tell him everything about my déjà vu feelings I had since I was a kid, something I've never told anyone, and at this point, he's trying to figure out if I'm sleep-deprived or stressed out, but it's not that. I know I met him, but he doesn't remember. And seriously, it's starting to mess with my head thinking about this. We haven't talked much about it since then, and obviously he doesn't believe me. Maybe someone here has had a similar experience, because I'm seriously worrying I'm going crazy or something. I'm a logical thinking guy, so this messes even more with me. 9. Once I was at the train station in one city, where I was waiting for another train to catch. It was a Saturday night at 1 a.m. Was supposed to wait a few hours. Boring, no headphones to listen to music. I was about to buy a pair and was thinking about it the whole week. I don't mean big ones, just normal earphones. Then I found some vending machine where instead of candies it had different electronic devices like flashcards, webcams, etc. Luckily, it had Apple's EarPods, but unluckily, the machine didn't accept my banknote. Then I decided to buy some tea to warm me up. Sat on a bench on a train station square. On the other side of the bench, there was an old lady smoking cigarettes. She was one of those old grandmas who travel and move everywhere with some old-fashioned weird backpacks and bags. She also had some special old machine to make cigarettes with. Like she used tobacco, papers, and filters, and the machine would do a cigarette for her. She was about 60 or 70 years old. I was sipping my tea and thinking about how boring it was without music. Suddenly some guy appears, says something to Grandma. I thought it's some hobo asking for money. Then he comes to me. He wasn't a hobo. He was well dressed, just some young guy in his 20s. So he comes to me, holding out his hand with white headphones in his palm. He asks me if I need headphones, and that he can sell them for $5. I asked him why did he want to sell them. He said that he didn't need them and that he needed money. I checked if they were working. They weren't special and they weren't amazing either, just cheap headphones. I thought why not, and took them. Although I was waiting at the station for a few hours, all described events happened within 15 to 20 minutes. At that point, I really wanted to listen to music and was thinking about it. As I mentioned, I was thinking about buying ones the whole week. Like, what the heck? If you really think about it, what are the odds that such events happen altogether? How often does some dude decide to sell his headphones to some stranger at night? How come I was at that bench exactly at that time, at that night, at that railway station, and after wanting headphones the whole week, and after attempting to buy ones at a vending machine, but it didn't work? If I had sat on that bench literally a few minutes later, then it would be too late, and the guy would have passed already. All these small variables led me to that moment. If any of those small events would not play out, it wouldn't happen, and this old lady with her cig-making machine. She alone wasn't that weird, but it always made the whole situation look funnier. What makes it even more ridiculous is that next week I found earpods in the lecture hall. I am a student. Apparently someone forgot them. I've waited for the owner, but he didn't come, so I decided to take the headphones. It reminds me of when you want something very hard, it comes true. You can be what you want and get what you want. It also looks like a joke from God or the Matrix, whatever it is. It felt like a cartoon, like I am in a game and it was just part of the plot, all a setup, very surreal. I'm not exaggerating. All events happen precisely as I described. It's like playing some game and the environment makes missions around you. For example, you drive a car in a city. and you pass some supermarket and you see that armed robbery is going on there. And maybe the game interface shows up and asks you whether you want to help and stop the robbers. While it's certainly made to look realistic, we all know it's just a program. Developers just wrote a code that when you come close to that supermarket randomly, it will create robbers there as if it actually happened to be by chance, exactly when you were there. And that's only one situation. The whole game will have hundreds of situations like that. And all for you, the main character. You probably get what I mean. 10. I guess I'll just start from the beginning. The first potential glitch I experienced is also the most likely to have been my fault. This one centers around me not remembering things, so my mom had to fill in the pieces for me later. I had this vivid memory for a while about lying in bed one morning, wondering why nobody was waking me up for breakfast. I got out of bed, went downstairs, and there was nobody in the house. I looked in all the rooms before finally looking out into the backyard. There they were, and not just my family, but a whole bunch of adults and children that I didn't really know, but probably knew from school. On the deck table was a cake with a blue paw print on it. My mom greeted me when I came out, and it was like the guest of honor had arrived. For the longest time I joked that this was a memory of not being invited to my own birthday party, while sincerely thinking I had just overslept and missed the earliest portion of a morning party. After describing the memory to my mom, she told me that it was my second birthday and I had a Blue's Clues cake. She said I had been outside playing and partying for hours before going inside to take a quick nap. Cake and presents were to come after the birthday girl was rested, I guess. I might have thrown a tantrum or something. I was a moody kid. Anyway, she was kind of sad I couldn't remember anything about the party events. But all of that is just gone from my brain. The next glitch was years later when I was in middle school. I was riding the bus back home, sharing my seat with my neighbor. I had the window seat and I was just kind of staring outside. I can't say I ever memorized our bus route, and I do have a tendency to space out, but for a moment I had clarity, and a thought to actually observe our surroundings. I thought I saw a suburban roadside that I had never seen before. I was unjustifiably worried about it, considering I really could have just never looked at that particular part of our route before, and so I kept staring at it. After about 2 blocks and turning a right corner, the scenery looped. Again, I thought I had spaced out. I kept watching, and it looped again in the same way. I then had this strange realization that we had been driving half an hour longer than we should have. I thought I'd fallen asleep looking out the window, but as soon as I took my eyes away from the window, it was obvious I was awake and moving. I brought up my concerns with my neighbors, saying we've been driving for like half an hour, and I don't know this street. She gave me a look, really? Smile, and asked what the heck I was talking about. I looked out the window again to see us taking the last left turn before our stop. Actually, that was the part that freaked me out the most because I lived downtown, nowhere near the suburbs, and our brief chat hadn't even lasted long enough for the bus to move 2 blocks. The next incident was when I was in high school, I think. My sister and I were looking for a DVD set of a show called Chuck. It was originally mine, but she ended up liking the show way more, and she wanted to watch it. We looked on the DVD shelf, looked in the drawers, looked in the DVD players, and even looked in all the other DVD cases, but we couldn't find it. So we looked in all those places a second time. We looked in random places. I went and looked in my room. My room had an amazing heat vent that stuck out from the wall at foot level right next to my bed. I had a habit of sitting with my back to my bed and warming up by that vent in the winter because I got cold easily. Because of that, the floor space there is always clear, but I looked anyway. It wasn't in my room either. I was giving up hope, but my sister forced me to keep looking. Somewhat deliriously, I called out, "Whoever took our DVD, can you please give it back?" We lived in a house that was almost 100 years old, so we sometimes joked that it might have ghosts or something. I never really believed ghosts would necessarily be evil if they did exist, so I felt comfortable joking, asking for a favor. I wandered around aimlessly, only still looking, because I wasn't allowed to stop. I ended up back in my room by the heat vent, and there it was, the Chuck DVD inside its case, sitting right where my butt would go if I were enjoying the heat vent. I froze for a second and picked it up, looking at it with disbelief. I told my sister I had found it in a place where I'd already looked. Not sure if she believed me of that, but we agreed that it was a weird spot for it to be. Especially because there's no TV or DVD player in my room, and we keep all the DVDs on a different floor of the house. The next happened after this, and there were often 2 in a year. Dreams, I mean. Dreams about my own future. The dreams would be about me doing something mundane yet notable within about 6 months from then. I wouldn't get the next dream until the first one to come to fruition. The dreams would only ever be a snapshot, and they never really made sense out of context. The first one I was careful to note down was of me working a strange machine on a countertop. That turned out to be the espresso machine at the coffee shop I ended up working at that winter. I never would have known what it looked like before seeing one, and it didn't click that it was from my dream, that I had practically forgotten about months later, until I was standing at the right angle in the right lighting, doing the right motions, with my field of vision lined up just right so that it was the exact 2-second snapshot from my dream. It hit me like déjà vu, except that I knew exactly when I had experienced it before. This same phenomenon repeated a few times since then. Once when I was reading a textbook for my college history class, once when I was writing a paper for my English class, once when I was watching a YouTube video, once for the new job I had at an Amazon shipping center, once when I was playing D&D at my friend's new house, and once when I was doing some of my own personal writing. Those last 2 both happened this year, and I haven't gotten another dream yet. Maybe I only get 2 per year. Whatever this particular phenomenon is, it sounds mystical, but it's overwhelmingly useless. The snapshots from the future are too brief and vague to be avoided. Not that I would need to, since it's only my own future and I have a mundane life. These visions of the future are also mundane. It seems impossible to change what I dreamed about, though. The moment my dream and reality line up, it feels right and perfect, kind of like it's my destiny. I don't like to get frustrated, so I usually play games on easy mode. It's not the challenge, but the play that makes it fun for me. So I could totally believe if I unknowingly made a deal with some being to have an easy, smooth-sailing, predestined life. I would be satisfied with having that. Oh shit, as I'm writing this, I suddenly remembered an important one. Not a dream per se, but a sudden unexpected thought in my head. I was biking down a hill, going pretty fast, and I was suddenly very attentive to the fact that some building's parking lot was connected to the road, meaning someone could turn into it. I was suddenly very aware that if they did that suddenly at my speed, I might not be able to stop in time to not collide with them and get seriously hurt or die. Because of these weird thoughts, I looked over my shoulder. It was empty road ahead of me, and saw a tan car. It had no turn signal and was driving at a reasonable speed. I wanted to relax but couldn't. I was compelled to look again as a tan car was passing me. A black car had come out of nowhere, going much faster than the tan car. It also didn't have a turn signal, but I slowed down and watched it like I couldn't afford to look away. At the last second, it flipped on its turn signal and veered into the parking lot. Some brief intuitive math let me know that if it hadn't slowed down, we actually would have been on a collision course. This last experience freaks me out the most of any of them. I was on a bit of a philosophical thing, toying with the idea that maybe I'm God and I erase my own memories to live as a human. Or maybe the world is guided by human consciousness, and exerting my will above others could actually make things happen. This was my summer before college, so these thoughts were part due to age and part due to life being as smooth as butter. Seriously, things go unusually well for me. Enough that I question it sometimes. Not that I'm ever unhappy with it. Anyway, I sort of experimented with the concept, trying to exert my will on the world to see if things happened. I was working at a coffee shop at the time. It was a very tourist-friendly area by a lake in Wisconsin. This woman walks in with 2 kids, one small and in her arms. It keeps staring at me with these amazing blue eyes. I usually hate kids, but this baby was gorgeous. so I had a much higher opinion of this little family than usual. You kids should have a better day, I thought assertively. This woman ordered some coffee, which I had ready for her in a jiffy, and as she was walking out with the kids, she said to them, "You know what? How about we get some ice cream?" And the boy cheered. I was a little shook, but not nearly convinced, so I needed to test it again. It was the next day, at a huge tent where these musicians were performing. There were many auxiliary tents set up around it for food stalls and seating areas. It was intermission, so I was sitting in a chair just chilling by myself. I saw these kids running around. As I said, I don't usually like kids, and I didn't like these, so I figured I would continue my experiment with them. I focused on one in particular kid. He was running towards this area with a bunch of plastic chairs shaded by a little roof tent. I thought at him, run between the ropes. There were ropes that hung down between the poles stuck into the ground. It would be inconvenient to run through that small gap instead of around, especially since the ropes were tied to the bottom of the pole. The kid ran between the pole and the ropes, though. I was stunned, frozen for a few seconds. I quickly focused on some girl running in an open area within my sight. "Fall," I muttered, and she did. She face-planted that very second, then got up immediately and kept running. That one freaked me out, even though I haven't experimented like that again. I think that now, even if I wanted to, there's too much fear and mental resistance, so it probably wouldn't work anyway. I don't know if I'm more worried that it wouldn't work, proving I don't have some strange power over the Matrix, or that it will work. Frankly, I'm more comfortable in the Matrix, and I don't really want to risk shattering the illusion. I only tried that 3 times, and it worked 3 times, which is partly why it freaks me out so much. 11. Our beloved Hellfreezer. Oh, I know that guy. Was live streaming today when I went online this afternoon to check for today's video. So I started watching today's video late, and because it was a glitch monthly, heard of those too, it was 7 PM by the time I finished. As a side note, not that I think it matters, a thunderstorm had popped up, so I shut down the computer and started dinner. I checked the clock, as I always do when I put the nacho chicken with pineapples in the oven. 7:30. I thought, great, I'll start the rice at 8, and everything should be timed to come out of the cookers when my husband walks through the door. Because it was still thundering, I went to stretch out on the bed and play games on my phone until the storm passes. I suddenly had a thought that we could have my husband's favorite tater tots instead of rice. I sent him a text to see if the change of menu would be acceptable, or if he had plans for the tots. He was all in, so I explained to my youngest how to set up the tots 3 times. She is kitchen challenged. Brilliant otherwise, but the kitchen seems to be an issue. She is 14 and a half, and even though I have had her working in the kitchen learning to cook since she was 5 years old, she just doesn't get it. I then checked the clock, 7:45. The tots might not be quite ready in time. I played my game on my phone. It takes about 30 minutes each time to get to the point I have to wait several hours for the timers in the game to restart. I played until I had to wait. My husband should be walking through the door and dinner should be done. I sit up and look at the clock. 6:15. Dinner is in the oven. My text clearly shows that I sent a message at 7:34. Check the atomic clock in the living room as it's on a battery. 6:17. Check the message I sent again. The timestamp reads 6:35, totally confused. I check the clock in the bathroom. It's also battery operated, 6:20. Check the timestamp on the message again, 6:15. I have checked it several more times over the last hour. It still says 6:15. Not a huge glitch, but I am definitely following that one up with a stiff whiskey. Take care, all, and hope to see you in chat in the next live stream. 12. I know this story is really dumb, but it's the only thing resembling a glitch in the Matrix I've ever experienced. And I've always thought it was funny how simultaneously weird and useless the whole thing is. So a few years ago, I was going to college and lived in a house with a couple of roommates. It was a weekday at around lunchtime, and my roommate Joe and I were the only 2 in the house, although he was up in his bedroom. I was going to make a ham sandwich for lunch, so I went to the fridge to get the ingredients. Couple things to note here. My fridge space was relegated to just one of the bottom drawers because I shared this apartment with 4 other people. And also, I had just gone grocery shopping literally the day before, so I knew that I had everything. When I opened my fridge door, however, there is no ham in it at all. The package was simply not there. I took everything out of the drawer, there wasn't much, and put it back in probably 2 or 3 times, scoured the rest of the fridge, looked in all the cupboards, just in case someone had moved it or something, and absolutely nothing. I honestly spent probably 10 full minutes looking for this sandwich ham. I figured one of my roommates either stole it or ate it all, but I also didn't really think that, considering I had just bought the ham the day before. Anyway, after a few minutes looking in the cupboard, I decided to check the fridge one more time for good measure. I opened the fridge door, opened my food drawer, and bam, right there sitting on top of everything I had just sorted through is my full container of sandwich ham. And again, I cannot stress enough how thoroughly I looked through the fridge the first time, and how positive I am that it was not there. So either A, it just literally disappeared and reappeared somehow, or B, I spent all that time shuffling through everything in the fridge, emptying and refilling my drawer for several minutes, and somehow missed it completely. Anyway, that is my only glitch in the Matrix, and maybe the dumbest one overall. 13. A few years back, my family, me and my significant other at the time, went to visit my grandma. She lived in the country where the closest neighbor was a few acres away. I grew up visiting her and riding 4-wheelers around the backcountry roads, so I knew my way around. I can still create a map in my head of what dirt road leads where. So after we say our hellos, I excitedly go get the 4-wheelers out from the barn, so my significant other and I can go riding. We hop on, and off we go. So I'm leading the way, pointing out the lake, the tree canopy, the neighbors' houses, etc. We take a couple turns, and I see something unfamiliar through the trees, towards an opening up ahead. We pull up to a tiny white church in the middle of nowhere, with only grass and fields surrounding it. And I'm talking tiny. This thing had to be 1 room, 600 square feet. It had a lock on the outside door. I notice there's a small graveyard to the left of it. I had never seen this church in the 15+ years of riding around, but it definitely wasn't newly built. The gravestones were worn down and the church looked old, but hey, maybe I had never gone down this road before. Unlikely, but possible. Then the unexplainable happened. We had stopped riding the 4-wheelers to have a conversation, and were just sitting on them in front of this church. I was talking to my significant other about something, and in the back of my head, I could hear a noise. I distinctly remember having a semi-conscious observation of the noise, thinking it was a bird singing. I finish whatever I was talking about, but my SO doesn't reply. They just stare at me. I give them a "you good" look, to which he replies, "Do you hear that?" Then it was like my brain clicked. The background noise of the bird singing came to the foreground of my brain, and I realized immediately it was most definitely whistling. There was a definitive tune and a wispiness. I said, "Someone whistling." Here's the kicker. The second I said that, the whistling stopped. We sat there for a few seconds, knowing there was not a person inside or outside the church, before panicking and saying, "Okay, time to go." I even asked my parents if they knew of any little white churches nearby. They did not. 14. Hello all, I'm 21 and female. Background. I take a shower every other night and have a specific playlist for my shower time. It's 10 songs long, and I know them all by heart and which order they are in. I have this so I can time my showers and not let myself get carried away in there. I also always open my shower window to let a steady airflow in, so it doesn't get too steamy in there. Yet even when I do this, my mirror will always be without a doubt fogged up, and the entire bathroom will be steamy and damp. Okay, so let's get into it. Tonight was pretty normal. I go into the bathroom, open the window, and get ready to shower. I start my playlist and hop in. Everything is basically the same as every other time I shower, so here I am, jamming out to my music and shampooing my hair. I close my eyes during this process. I'm about 2 songs in when I finish shampooing and rinse them, open my eyes. I notice that my shower window is now closed. So naturally, I get a little freaked out, but end up just chalking it all up to me forgetting to open it this time, because, mind you, I am usually super high when I shower, so I leave the window closed and carry on with my shower and sing along to my tunes. Disclaimer, I'm a very avid smoker. I smoke a good amount of weed every day, so I know this would not be a factor in what happened tonight. When my favorite song comes on, the 8th song in the playlist, I know it's time to start washing my face and wrapping up the shower. So I start the process and rinse my face off, eyes closed, back to the window. When I'm done, I open my eyes to see that my window is open yet again. And as I'm standing there naked, wet, and terrified about how the heck this keeps happening, I realize that the song I just listened to, my favorite one, started over from the beginning. I know that it cannot have been double added to the playlist because, as I stated before, I know each song on this playlist and what order they are in. There are 2 more songs after the infamous replaying itself one. I listen to it almost every day. This has never happened before. So naturally, I'm incredibly freaked out and I quickly finish up and hop out of the shower. And to top it all off, my bathroom isn't steamy at all. It's almost as if nobody ever showered in there. Usually my mirror is all fogged up, my walls are a little wet, the counter is wet, but everything was bone dry. I am honestly at a loss for words. I don't know what would explain this except for the fact that it was a crazy glitch. I'm a very open-minded person, and I'm so curious to see what y'all have to say. Thank you for listening, and I hope you're all doing great and staying healthy. 15. If you don't know what a lockout tag is, it's a little tag you can secure to machinery to let others know it's currently not in use. In some cases, they will have room to write an explanation, the date, or who put it there as initials. I am a fishmonger, butcher, whatever else at a grocery store chain. I work the closing shift 6 nights a week, and once a week the closer is supposed to clean the case that displays the fresh meat. Cleaning it means fully taking it apart and cleaning every part and then putting it back together. This process takes about an hour, and I stay late once a week to do it. No one else would ever have any reason to disassemble it, or the time because it's in use during business hours. There's no way to access the fans until every other part has been taken out. Tonight, when I was taking it apart to get to the fans, I saw a lockout tag dangling from the wire that controls one of the fans. I immediately took notice of it because I had never seen it before in the 2 years I've cleaned these cases. And it was a damn lockout tag, so I shouldn't even really have that fan plugged in if it's on there. I read glitch stories all the time, and I started to get really spooked the more I investigated and thought on it through tonight. The lockout tag was bright yellow, but looked clearly weathered, as if it had been there a long time. It was also not one of the lockout tags my company had used since I've been there. The tag said lockout with 2 lines for extra writing. In black marker that also looked old, it said 1980 RPM 11/22/17. I absolutely know this tag has never been on that wire. I have touched it hundreds of times. Sorry for all the explanation in the beginning. I just needed to stress that it would not be easy to get in there and put the tag there. The only explanation I can come up with is that someone from the company that sold us the cooler, a different company, different lockout tag, had put the tag there and was incredibly incompetent, so they wrote the wrong date and forgot to take it off. Also, no one mentioned the case breaking to me. And I guess the fan bringing in dust made the tag look old really quickly. That's what I'm telling myself. 16. Okay, so let me start off by saying I don't do drugs. I don't have any severe mental illness, and these experiences were in no way exaggerated from what I'm about to tell you. And maybe they could be connected. About 4 years ago, I'm going to guess 2016-ish, I lived in Las Vegas, Nevada. I was hanging out with a girlfriend one night when another one called me asking if I wanted to meet up at her apartment. I explained I was already with a friend who she did not know or ever met, and asked if it was okay if I bring company. She said it was completely fine, so we went over. About an hour into hanging out, the 2 girls are hitting it off, and I'm kinda zoning out doing something on my phone. They were talking about some celebrity when I hear one of my friends start talking in numbers like binary code. Like 112011. I looked up from my phone because WTF, and the other girl replies the same way, but a different number combination. I asked them, why did you just do that? Do what? Talking in numbers like that. What? Oh, okay, anyways. And they continued on with their conversation. Normally, not in numbers. The numbers never changed from 1, 2, or 0, so not true binary. I didn't speak about this to anyone for months because I thought I was losing my mind and was waiting to have some sort of breakdown. Shortly after that, through some research, I became aware of the glitches in the Matrix phenomenon. Alright, hopefully you're still with me. Fast forward about 3 months. Luckily, I was not alone for this and experienced it with someone else. My close friend and I went to the movies every week, if not more. We'd stop at this video game shop before across from the movie theater if we had time to kill. It was a tradition and regular thing for us. The theater was about a 10 to 15 minute drive depending, and we always took one of 2 same routes to get there, just out of habit. This particular day we had about 1 hour and 30 minutes before the 8:30 movie started, and we noticed a side street we had never seen before. I thought, what the hey, let's try it. We turned down the street and go about half a mile down. It was 2 lanes on each side, with a barrier in the middle. When it suddenly happened, time was abruptly at like a standstill or in slow motion. Also, all the lights got slightly dimmer, but seemed to glimmer more. It was also really loud, kind of like a whomp, whomp, whomp noise. There were other cars on the road, about 4, and I had to swerve around one of them to avoid an accident since they suddenly were barely moving. Right after I adjusted my course, my friend and I were thrown back to hit our seats, and experienced a feeling I can only compare to when you go to the bottom of the pool and push yourself up as hard as you can to the surface, except we didn't get wet. We both blacked out and came to in the movie parking lot 15 minutes before our showing. Both of us were in shock and didn't speak to each other until after the movie, because there was nothing to say initially. We've only brought it up once since then. Thinking and writing about it now puts my stomach in knots. We went back one night in an attempt to find the road, and cannot. We then tried thinking of what streets it's off of or by. We got extremely disoriented, and I've honestly done my best to just block it out. If anyone has a theory for these events, why they were so close together for me personally, are they connected, or strange phenomena that just so happened to me? I've never experienced anything else like this ever. This is my first time talking about either of these experiences in 4 years, besides with my friend and mother. Thank you for your time. 17. A few years ago, my mom's cousin, Amy, and her mom visited my mom. They had a long conversation, yada yada yada. Pretty normal, right? Except this visit had caught my mom off guard because Amy did not call or message her to say she was visiting. My mom still allowed her in, though, because she didn't want to be rude. Amy had made an offhand comment somewhere in the conversation about my mom telling her she could visit sometime that week when my mom was at Amy's house with my grandfather, but the thing is, my mom never went to Amy's house. At this point in my mom's life, she had 5 children and she was a secondary school teacher. Not saying that parents and teachers don't go out, but I'm just saying my mom didn't because of this. She also doesn't drive, because my dad doesn't want her driving as she was a pretty inexperienced driver. Got her license in 2004, got pregnant with my brothers in 2004, 2006, and 2010. So any visits she did make were few and far between. And also had to involve my dad, who was also a busy secondary school teacher. Any visits my mom did make were limited to her parents, who lived at a water village. I don't know how else to translate this, English is not my first language. About an hour away from us. The fact the visit to Amy's house was made with my grandfather was even more puzzling, because my grandfather's been bedridden for a big part of my life. He used to be healthy, though, so a lot of our relatives who moved to live in these villages, especially the ones who moved to live in normal houses, like Amy, in recent years didn't know he was sick. This obviously made my mom confused, and she asked Amy and her mom about this non-existent visit. This made them confused too, because earlier that week, my mom and my grandfather had apparently visited her at her house. Because of the reasons I stated above, this was obviously not possible, so everyone was pretty spooked about it. I've always wondered about this. My mom had no reason to lie. Trying to get my grandfather in a different room would be impossible and cause him a lot of pain, never mind going out to visit someone. If Amy and her mom were lying, why would they do that? They could always call and visit. Just because my mom couldn't visit them didn't mean they couldn't come over. Thoughts? And for anyone wondering, Mom drives okay now. 18. This happened 19 days ago. It completely freaked me out, and I'm still trying to figure out what the hell happened. My girlfriend came down with a non-COVID illness that ended up putting her in the hospital. I drove her there and got her checked in, then called her sister, who lives out of state, to bring her up to speed. This was in the middle of the day. I did not speed, and my plan was to take the side of the road all the way home. The hospital is 11 miles away, directly north of my house, and I know this area of Dallas like the back of my hand. I decided to take a familiar side road home, to avoid the tollway. The sister and I had been talking on the speakerphone for 9 minutes when I noticed the road, one I know very well, was unfamiliar. Then suddenly I realized I was now approaching Love Field Airport. This airport is roughly 6 miles south of my house. I pulled over immediately, shaking. The sister and I confirmed we'd only been talking for 9 minutes, and I had started the phone call as I left the hospital parking lot. She and I both couldn't explain it. Once she realized what I was describing, it freaked her out just as much. In order to drive 15+ miles to left field, I would have had to cross under one major freeway, and cross both a major cross street and an additional major highway. I had absolutely no recollection of doing so. I also would have had to average around 90 miles an hour on a suburban road with a speed limit of 35 miles per hour. I had not done so. I took a pick of left field, then turned back around and drove home, a drive that took me, as it always has in the past, a little over 10 minutes. I did not recall any stutters or blips in the drive itself. All the cars around me stayed the same, normal traffic coming and going. Nothing really shifted. I was driving normally when I realized the neighborhood I was in definitely wasn't one I recognized as being between the hospital and my house on that road. The situation has not happened again. 19. Hi. So I take Suboxone. I've taken it for years. I take a very small dose, 1/8 of a strip a day, so nowhere near enough to put me in an altered state of mind. Over the social distancing we've been going through, I decided it was a good time to try and stop taking it, since I wouldn't have to worry about going to work through withdrawals. I gave my bottle to my boyfriend as a deterrent to give up. Not that he wouldn't give it to me if I needed it. I just knew it would make it harder to go to him and have to ask than just grab one out of my nightstand. So about 2 weeks into not taking any, I had to take my pupper to the vet, and I asked my boyfriend to cut me off the smallest piece of the strip. Which he did, and then he put it back up with the rest of them. A few days later, I hate to admit, I gave up and said I didn't want to spend the next month to a year feeling like shit, and broke down crying because I felt like a failure at life. That's when my boyfriend told me it was okay, he understood, and that I shouldn't hate myself for not succeeding in my attempt at quitting. He gave me my bottle back, and he also gave me the strip he had cut the piece off of. I remember specifically asking for it first because I remember having trouble breaking it down correctly because a piece had already been cut off in a way I wouldn't have cut it, so it was harder to get correct measurements. I always put the remaining pieces in a pill case instead of back in the package. I just throw that away. 2 days ago, I was going to the bathroom and noticed a Suboxone packet tucked under a mouthwash in the medicine cabinet. Next bottle doesn't get moved a lot since it's not in use at the moment, with half a strip in it. My boyfriend swears that it's the one I had him cut a few pieces off of for me. It wasn't anywhere near the amount missing from the strip I found. As previously stated, I'm sure I took that one. Not a huge deal, but enough to freak me out a little. We live alone, and my boyfriend doesn't do any drugs other than occasionally hitting my weed, so there's absolutely zero chance that he decided to take any of it. So I'm just completely lost on what happened. 20. On my way back to a friend's house for the weekend, I noticed a car stopped about a quarter mile ahead in the middle of a 3-lane highway. It was around 12:40ish in the morning on a hot summer night. I noticed a car in the far left lane that stopped beside a red car but then peeled out. I then rolled up my windows and sunroof as I didn't know what was going on ahead of me. As I approached, I slowed down to see what was going on. Perhaps someone needed assistance. But before I could fully scan the road in front of the stopped car, something caught my attention on my right side, roughly at my 3 o'clock. I saw some lights come from one of the greens at the golf course a few feet from the flag and pole. All I know about the place is it's very conservative. Now I couldn't see everything due to the half-trimmed pine trees that needed pruning. I was in the far left lane when I came to a stop where the stopped car was, in the middle lane. I noticed an opaque, yes opaque, UFO. It was the first time I've ever seen a 3D projection, my best description of it. It was saucer-shaped with 2 levels to it, with oval-shaped windows towards the bottom, middle, and top portions. The middle part was a much thicker, wider portion of the saucer. The top and bottom portion was smaller. Inside the windows was nothing but light. I noticed no furniture, walls, etc. It was silver and black, emitted a purplish and regular HID kind of light. This craft was big as a house in size. It wasn't transparent, yet wasn't physical looking. I searched all visible areas around this craft, yet didn't see anyone nor any equipment. No cameras, projectors, anything that would explain to me why I'm seeing this. All I could see was the flag and pole for the hole, the area where you putt, the green, rough area, and the sand trap, as well as an old wooden chicken wire kind of fencing, along with those pine trees that are trimmed up about 10 feet, as well as other parts of the golf course. I looked inside the stopped car. It was a red Buick. I didn't know what to expect, as I recall the other car took off in a hurry. I saw an older woman in her 40s, petrified with fear. I don't know what she witnessed, but she was in a frozen state. All she did was look at me. I rolled down my passenger window and told her, "Put your foot on the gas and follow me." I began to move forward, and that's when the other lights caught my attention further in the golf course. There were about 3 more of those ships in there, all opaque, and one took off and was heading right for us. I was briefly puzzled, because I scanned that area earlier and didn't see any lights before, but there they were. I screamed at the woman using hand signals, "It's time to go! Give us some gas, lady!" She began to move, and we began to drive and pick up speed to around 30 miles per hour or so. I kept pace as fast as she was willing to go, until we got to the traffic light ahead. That's how the highway worked. It turned into a 2-lane suburb street. As we drove, she kept looking at me, pointing to what she saw, and I nodded my head to acknowledge her. I briefly rolled down my window and told her we would talk more at the light. I just wanted to get out of the area. About a mile down the road, we came to the light that just turned red. I looked out of my sunroof, looking for anything suspect, and found nothing. I got out of my car and looked around and didn't see anything. I looked at the woman in her car, and she had her head down. "Hey, miss, are you all right? Hey, miss, everything okay?" She raised her head facing the windshield and never turned her head towards me. She became the most monotone person I've ever seen. Neither happy nor sad, just focused on the road. I felt awkward staring at her. It was as if I wasn't there to her. Then suddenly, without looking for cross-traffic, she made a right turn from the middle lane and drove off before the light turned green. That particular road could take you back to the golf course if you made another right turn further up. I'm not sure where she went. I continued on to my friend's house. I had a few more traffic lights where I got out each time to look around, as I recall patting down the hairs on my arm. The thing that got to me most wasn't the object in the golf course, but how the woman reacted at the traffic light. She acted like someone else, for lack of a better term. She was oblivious to what just happened, as if a light switch got turned off. When I got to the house, I stayed outside for at least 20 minutes, collecting my thoughts and looking at the sky. I didn't see anything, and told my friend about what happened. To this day, I have not seen any mention of 3D projections out in the open like that. Although I still believe it was some sort of projection, I never found a source of where it came from, or why it happened in a golf course. The only thing I've ever come across was Project Bluebeam or something like that. This was over 15 years ago, so I've not followed up on it for some time now. I don't know if that UFO was supposed to be a real thing or not. I don't have an explanation to what I saw because technology hasn't reached a point where 3D projections or holograms out in public view are a thing. Was it real? I really don't know. Perhaps some sort of glitch. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Glitch Monthly, number 10. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use and sent in stories for use in this video. If you have a story yourself you'd like to send along, then please do send it along to kingofthecities@gmail.com. Now, just a sec, I do have a little bit of a plug I'd like to give. Where did I save that? Oh, there we are. The author of story... Come on, where are we? No, before that... Ah, there we go. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Story number 6, I believe. The story about the engagement ring and the journey with the blue box and the missing rings. Our friend there who wrote that story, Pilarski? Pilarski, yeah. Sorry, it looked like it was a space server, but there wasn't. Okay. Our friend Pilarski is they're a game developer, and you can follow them. I will remember to link this in the description. If I haven't, yell at me, please. You can find them on Twitter with @animalgoode. That's animal, spelled the way you'd expect, with good with GOODE. I will include that in the description. If you'd like to have a look into what the game they're developing is, it's based on the experience they wrote about. And they have offered to let me have a look at an advanced version of the game. I may, we'll see. We'll see where they are and whether or not they're still interested in doing so. So if you like, then please do by all means check out Pilarski's game. Okay. And with that, I'm going to head off for now. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.